I knew this was coming, and out of the gate, it has arrived. The Department of Justice has sued Apple. You will forgive me for being old school and calling it Apple Computer because as I was growing up, it was Apple Computer. I'm a huge Apple fan. Every product around me right now is an Apple product. I like Apple. A lot of friends of mine growing up were into PCs and Windows machines because Windows machines were always customizable and very flexible. My son wanted a gaming PC. Apple sucks at gaming PCs, so we went to Vision Computer and got him his gaming PC. It's a Windows machine, and I used to have to be very proficient at Windows machines because I was tech support for my law firm for a while. I tech support for my family. I used to have a tech support job at my school. But my school growing up overseas, we used Apples. I started in first grade on an Apple II, then an Apple IIe and IIc, and then my favorite Apple machine ever was the Apple IIgs. I loved the Apple IIgs. But they were moving to the Macs. They killed the 2GS. The first came the Lisa, which was a flop, and then the Mac. And my gosh, that machine was amazing. So for those of you who are used to modern Windows machines, those of you who are younger than me, Philip, originally you had something called DOS, and you had to put in command prompts to get what you wanted. And then they started making graphical interfaces, GUI, graphical user interface. And then Apple came along in 1984 with the Mac and did something they called WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. And the difference between the PC market and the Apple market is that the Apple market was closed. You had to buy Apple stuff. Things weren't always compatible with Windows stuff. It was a specific operating system with specific formats, and things weren't interchangeable. You could swap between one friend's PC and another friend's PC, and everything was compatible. But with the Apple stuff, it was all Apple or not. And I liked the closed Apple system because you were less prone to get viruses. All my friends with PCs kept getting viruses. And they said for a long time, well, it was because there's so many more. That's why they focused on it. It wasn't really true. Clearly not so now. I liked that it was closed and everything worked together. Well, Apple came out with the iPhone, and the history of the world has changed with the iPhone. In fact, every phone before the iPhone had fixed keyboards. And afterwards, it's rare to find a phone these days with a fixed keyboard. Everybody mocked Apple for getting rid of the physical keyboard, and now everybody followed suit. In fact, Samsung notoriously copied Apple down to the specific look of the phone, causing lots of lawsuits and settlements along the way. And then Apple did something that very few other companies in history have ever done. Invented a whole economy. Before the Apple iPhone, apps were not really a thing. After the iPhone, and remember when Apple first came out, they bragged about using web apps. You could use web apps, but everybody knew that wasn't true. It was a half solution. Even Apple realized it behind the scenes and started building an app store. And the app store economy exploded. And now there are companies that exist because Apple invented an app store and you could use their apps on your phone. And then Google came out with Android to compete with Apple, and lots of lawsuits involved there as well between the two, stealing information and copying people's stuff. And now there's this back and forth every year. Apple releases an iPhone, Google releases its Nexus, and back and forth they go over who copied who and who was first and who was last and whose was better, which camera is better, which system is better. And you have this situation now where you can go with Apple, which is a closed system where everything works together very integrated, or you can go with Android where it's a very open system, but it doesn't always work well together. And the Department of Justice is now suing Apple for its closed system. Well, I laughed at this reading through the lawsuit before the show. One of the things that they're going after is, the joke is the green chat bubbles. The Department of Justice, I kid you not, is suing Apple because the green chat bubbles give people an inferiority complex, suggesting that they are somehow inferior. They are. They are. That's not my opinion. That's a fact. Not the people, but the messages. That's the point of the green chat bubble. People don't understand. You see, the Android system doesn't have proprietary messaging built in. Apple has something called iMessage. It spends a fortune on the back end for end-to-end encryption for text messages for its users who use its devices. So whether I'm on my Mac or on my Apple Watch or on my iPad or on my iPhone, I can send encrypted messages end-to-end that come across with all sorts of extra data that isn't possible in SMS. SMS messages are easily hackable, easily transmittable, easily findable, easily shareable, easily stolen by nefarious people. So Apple uses the green bubble to signify to its users that you're sending and you're texting with a system that is not secure. And the blue bubbles mean you're texting with Apple's proprietary system that's highly secure. That's what it means. Apple built a system that is very secure, and now the Department of Justice is suing Apple for that system, claiming because it built a secured system that only its users can use, that's bad. That it's a monopoly. It's not a monopoly. I can send messages to my board op producer, Charlie, who refuses to get a superior iPhone and insists that we send him green chat bubbles. I don't like to send green chat bubbles to people because I don't like to talk to the poor people. And yet I got to with him. And he's well paid. He's not actually poor. He just acts like it. Listen, y'all, this is a dumb lawsuit. The problem is, for example, one of the other things they're accusing Apple of is its wallet system. You can use Apple Pay. And credit card companies complain to the Department of Justice that Apple won't let them access the workings of the phone in order to use that system. Well, they won't, because Apple made a choice different from every other cell phone manufacturer. And it's actually worked against Apple with the rise of AI. I mean, Siri is the dumbest of all of the online voice assistants. Siri is terrible. Alexa's so much better. The Microsoft system is better. The Google system better. The reason Siri sucks is because Apple made the decision to leave everything on the phone. Custom chips were made to be able to do all the functioning on the phone. So Siri constantly lags behind because everything is done over the phone. It's not transmitted over the web, so it's much more secure. And so the reason banks are not given access to Apple's NFC system, that is the little chip in the phone that allows wireless payments, is because it would break down the security system of the phone to let third parties have access to that chip. It's all designed to protect Apple's consumers from hacking. It's all designed to protect Apple's consumers from being scammed. And because Apple went out of its way to protect its consumers, they're being sued by the Department of Justice for making a closed, secure system. Another issue in the lawsuit is that Apple's watch works better with the iPhone. Well, of course it does. It's made by the same company. So it's all integrated, and it's all about security and privacy. Really, this is a backdoor by the Department of Justice to open up Apple's systems so the Department of Justice can snoop on Apple's users better. For years, they've tried to get Apple to build backdoors into their systems so that the DOJ could snoop on consumers. And since Apple has refused, now they're being sued because supposedly they have a closed system. The app economy that you know today would not exist but for Apple. The phone economy that you know today would not exist but for Apple. And because it's been successful, the Department of Justice is punishing it when you yourself have a choice to use Apple or to go to Google and Android. And the Department of Justice says the reason that this is a monopoly is Apple has made it very difficult for you to jump ship from Apple's devices to someone else. So you made your choice, consumer, and you decided you wanted to stay in Apple's system. Now, here's the problem. Some of you will say, well, this is no big deal because if Apple's forced by the Department of Justice to open up its systems, you don't have to use that stuff on your phone, except if Apple has to open its systems to the banks so they can use the NFC chip, to the apps so they can take advantage of the remote proximity locators, well, suddenly the hackers now know how to get in. Suddenly the hackers can get into the systems they've never been able to get into. And they can compromise my phone that doesn't have any of the stuff on it because they know the route through the back door now that they don't know right now. It undermines everyone's security by them doing this. But this is a larger issue from the Biden team. Let's go back to the JetBlue story from yesterday. The Biden administration has told JetBlue and Spirit Airlines they're not allowed to consolidate. That consolidation is bad for the consumers in the same way that Apple's closed system is bad for the consumers. Here's the problem. We're seeing this already. JetBlue's now cutting routes. They can't financially afford to do it. Had they been able to get the economies of scale in aviation by merging with Spirit Airlines, they would have been able to leave these routes. But now Spirit and JetBlue are cutting back routes and costing people jobs. People are losing jobs. Not only that, fares are having to go up to be able to sustain it. It's actually anti-consumer to prevent the consolidation because not only has it put workers out of work, it's also reduced the number of available routes that JetBlue flies, thereby allowing other airlines to drive up their prices on these routes because they now lacked the competition from JetBlue. It was all so obvious. The problem with the Justice Department and the problem with the Biden administration are the same thing. They are completely dominated by people who are academics or nonprofit workers. They don't actually live in the real world where you have to make a paycheck and balance a budget and have revenue to be able to make ends meet to pay employees. They've worked in the academic setting where they can have grand theories about privatization and monopolies and how they work, and they've worked in the nonprofit sector where they beg donors. They don't actually have to make a valuable commodity to generate revenue. And so they look at a company like Apple that is a for-profit business that makes a valuable commodity, or they look at JetBlue that for economies of scale needs to grow, and the only way to grow is to merge, and they say, no, you can't do this because in my academic theory from 30 years ago, consolidation of the airline industry was a bad thing, and therefore you can't do this. And gosh, Apple, you can't allow people to choose to be on your system and platform and be safe from hackers. You must open it so we can get in through a back door and spy on your users. Great American success story, Apple is. And because of it, they're being punished by the Biden Justice Department. You do not have to use an iPhone. You do not have to use a Mac. You can get a Windows PC. You can get an Android device. For those of us who made the choice to go with Apple because we want everything to work and to be well integrated together, this ruins our decision making. We chose to get into the cult. We chose, knowing when we went in, it would be a closed system, and that's what we wanted because it was safer, it was secure, and things worked better. And we would be limited in some ways because, the Mac is not the dominant computer system out there. iOS is the dominant cell phone system out there, but there are actually more Android devices in the world than there are iPhones. Biden administration doesn't care about that. The Biden administration cares about feelings. And the TikTokers are upset about the blue bubbles in the chat system. And so the Biden administration had to take action because the raging progressives of TikTok demanded it. So they're suing the world's most profitable company that upended change, revitalized the economy, and made billionaires out of a lot of people who were able to take advantage of a system Apple built. And because they built it, they'll now be punished for building it and maintaining it. Thanks, Joe Biden.